Hi, my name is Dhanesvara. I'm here at a temple in Central Europe, a temple that had its heyday in the era of Harikesh Prabhu. And devotees here have asked me to answer a number of controversial questions for the devotees about different aspects of Krishna consciousness. So they gave me a rather long list, 39 questions. We're not going to address all of them today, but rather we're going to address just some of the more prominent ones. And perhaps we'll have another episode of this sometime in the future. This video will be posted on my website, or rather on my YouTube channel. It's not meant for general distribution. It's meant actually for devotees who are having troubles with some of these issues. They may want to consult it in lieu of speaking to a senior devotee if they don't have that opportunity. Before we begin with the questions, I'm going to just make some general comments. First thing I'd like to note is that I'm not an apologist for ISKCON. As, if you know me, you know that I'm not a sannyasi in ISKCON, although I well could be. The reason I'm not a sannyasi in ISKCON is because sannyasi in ISKCON, in my opinion, is a political position, and in my opinion, politics and spiritual life don't go well together. Therefore, I'm avoiding that. So, anyway, I offer that as some testimony to the fact that I'm not interested in manipulating people for some political agenda. The second point that I'd like to make is many devotees are finding fault with ISKCON. Well, the point is there is no ISKCON. ISKCON is a concept, it's a corporation, and it's not a reality, it's a fiction. Corporations are means of people, corporations are actually agreements by which people cooperate together for certain purposes. So there is no ISKCON. We're going to complain about ISKCON is this or ISKCON is that. No, there's people. And a better way to address these issues would be to say this person said this or this person did that, not ISKCON did this or ISKCON did that. That way we remain clear on what the real issue is or where the real problem is. Very important thing for us to understand. Third point that I'd like to make is that we should avoid borrowing trouble from the internet. Borrowing trouble means that somebody else has a problem and we hear about it and it seems like a great injustice to us, and so we get all disturbed about it, that there should be a law or there should be some action taken against somebody. The point is, if it's not your problem, maybe it's better that you don't get involved. There's all kinds of problems in this world. There's unlimited problems in the world. And if people are going to get upset about other people's problems all the time, then you have no time left to think about your own life. Better that you focus on your own life, what's needed for you in your own development of Krishna consciousness, rather than be concerned about the problems of other people. If you're in a position of authority or in a position to affect some change, then there may be some reason for you to be involved. But if you don't have a position of authority, or you're not involved, or you don't rather personally know the people involved, then why should it concern you? So the point is, don't borrow trouble. The next point I'd like to make is that many of the questions that are on this list are there because devotees seem not to really understand the process and the purpose of Krishna consciousness, or ISKCON. And I'll speak about some of those things today. But the point is that if we understood better what Krishna consciousness is all about, what we are trying to do in Krishna consciousness, then many of these questions wouldn't be questions for us. And then lastly, what I'm speaking today are simply my opinions as a senior devotee. I don't have any official capacity in the institution. I'm not speaking for the institution or for anybody else. So keep that in mind. So first we're going to take up one question that's on the minds of many, many devotees. And these are questions that are related to sex and the ability to control the senses. I'm going to read these questions. One, some devotees are wondering, what does it really mean, illicit sex? Is this only outside of marriage or also within marriage, if it's not for producing children? And the comment goes on, in the society we live in, we are brought up in, sex is popularized and commercialized. One practically cannot avoid the subtle and sometimes gross sexual content on the internet, television, on the billboards outside of our homes, etc. Many devotees, before joining the society, were also heavily influenced by pornography and had developed an addiction to such material. So how are such people expected to have sex only with their wife, only once a month, and only for begetting children? How can we, children of the West and still living in a sexually perverted Western world, follow such principles of the high Vedic civilization? And then there's another question related to this. If a brahmachari can no longer follow celibacy but is not willing to make the transition to grihastha ashram and take on the responsibility, which is the most honest thing to do what is the most honest thing to do for such an individual? Is it okay if he stays a brahmachari and hides his weakness from the society? So we're going to deal with the second question first. The second question, if a brahmachari can no longer follow celibacy and is not willing to make the transition to a grihastha ashram, then what is his understanding of Krishna consciousness? Everybody has sex desire. We have to admit that first of all. Now, you have a material body means you have a sex desire. Eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, these are the 4 requirements of material life. So therefore, one has to deal with these things in a responsible way. If a brahmachari is disturbed by sex desire, then the proper thing for him to do, if he wants to make advancement in Krishna consciousness, is to get married and dovetail or engage that sensual desire in the service of the Lord by begetting children. Now, the next question comes, then why would devotees not want to have children? Why is it that, we have sex desire, we get married, we have a wife, she also has sex desire, so the responsible thing to do is to engage this desire in the service of the Lord by begetting children. Why not? What is the problem with begetting children? So let's go back to the general question above. First of all, we can understand factually that this principle is not being followed within the society. And I can state that as a matter of fact simply because if it were, we would see many devotee families with 3, 4, 5, and more children. Right? If you're having sex only at the time for procreation, then where are the children? So we understand, first of all, that devotees are not following this principle. And we have to be honest with ourselves and understand what it is we're trying to do. We cannot make progress in Krishna consciousness if we allow our senses to carry us away. As Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita, one should bring them under control. One should fix the mind on Krishna and restrain the senses as much as possible. Krishna also states in the Bhagavad Gita that one should regulate the senses. And it means just that you eat only at certain times of the day, you sleep at a prescribed time, get up at a prescribed time, and you may have sexual intercourse with your wife on a regulated basis. If one will do that on a regulated basis without pornography, then one should see gradually in the course of time that their desire for this decreases. One should not use the grahastha ashram as a license for sense gratification, and understanding that if we do, that our efforts to make progress in Krishna consciousness will be hampered. So we have to deal with it in a responsible way. Several years ago, back in, I think it was 2011, I gave a series of lectures at the Russian Festival on family life, sex desire, and bringing sex desire under control. And I believe those videos are on my YouTube website. Some of the authorities had problems with my statements, and I answered those questions very much the same as I said earlier, but in much more detail. Because the idea is that no, we're supposed to only have sex once a month for the purpose of procreation. Well, again, I'm very much of the opinion that devotees are not following that. Better if they do, that they have intercourse without contraception, and thereby they're not at least committing that sin of interfering with the birth of the child. As far as all the children that are going to come, well, it's very simple. Krishna is the maintainer of everyone. If he sends more children to your family, he's going to maintain them. Of course, you'll have to do the work. But we should not be concerned that somehow or other, how am I going to support all these children? I met once a woman in Lithuania. She raised up more than 1,000 children. If you can believe that. She's a very amazing woman. So if one woman and her husband can raise over 1,000 children, certainly most ordinary devotees, by the grace of Krishna, can raise 3, 4, 5, or even more. Anyway, I'm not going to go into more detail in this video about this question. If you want to see the detailed answer, please look at the video on the YouTube channel regarding not only sex life, but also watch the video, How to Conquer Over Sex Desire. Okay? Okay, the next question we're going to deal with the next subject we're going to deal with is women and their position in the society and the question of female diksha guru. As we know, there's a lot of controversy regarding women in the society. There was one person who made an analysis, actually a former devotee, made an analysis of Prabhupada's books, finding that 80% of all statements made by Prabhupada about women are negative. And 56% of these statements portray women as objects mainly about sex or temptation sex. The thing that we have to understand about that is that the Bhagavatam and the Vedic literature in general are written for the male from the male perspective. They're written for men because men have an advantage in pursuing spiritual life over women. So therefore the Bhagavatam is addressed in that way, and thus the statements about women are said in that way. It's a fact, everybody knows, that as Prabhupada has taught us, women are like fire, men are like butter. And the combination are not good. Therefore, in the traditional Vedic society, there's separation between the sexes practically in every instance. because it leads to problems. If we look at, for example, the divorce rate in Western society, it's over 50% and even above 80% in some countries. Unfortunately, the statistics for ISKCON are not much different because why? Because we're raised in the Western culture and we're subject to the same, let's say, indoctrination that everybody else is. And consequently, we think about marriage, family life, economics, everything, quite the same way as everybody else. So we should not be surprised that that the divorce rate in ISKCON is not different than the general populace. If we had our own separate society that was separated from the general population in every respect, then we might expect some difference, but we don't have that. So, another part of this question is, so what are women to do? Are women simply sex objects? Well, actually, one has to understand that because the Bhagavatam is written from the male perspective, therefore the ladies, they can read the Bhagavatam but just reverse the pronouns so that they can understand it the same way. It's not exactly the same, of course, because sexual stimulation for men is quite different than it is for women. Women are not aroused the same way that men are sexually. And I think that women can appreciate and understand that. So consequently, there needs to be some separation. But Prabhupada also writes that just as woman is Maya for man, man is Maya for woman. We think that we're going to find happiness in the opposite sex. We feel ourselves incomplete as a person, and so we want to become more whole by taking a spouse. But of course this is done through false ego, and doesn't really, let's say, solve our existential problem at all, rather than compound it. So, anyway, that's the point why Prabhupada's statements about women are mainly negative. But if the Bhagavatam are written from the perspective of women, it would be the same thing, that the statements about men would be mainly negative. The point is that sex life is a deterrent towards self-realization. And Prabhupada is writing specifically for the purpose of guiding his followers how to make progress in spiritual life, understanding that sex is one of the main shackles that prevents us from achieving self-realization. Therefore, it should be minimized completely, or let's say, minimized as much as possible. And Prabhupada gives the example, just like salt. Too much or too little, everything is spoiled. So sex life, also like that. Too much, everything is spoiled. Too little, and the mind is always disturbed. So one has to regulate the senses and endeavor to minimize sexual desire, whether you're a man or a woman. Okay, then. So connected with the women issue is, of course, the female diksha guru. And this has become a controversy because the standards for women in the West are much different than they might be in India. As you may know, the Indian, let's see, how do they call it? The ISKCON has a special council of just the Indian temples. It's a special yatra all by itself. And they absolutely refuse to allow female diksha guru within India. And now, of course, Prabhupada writes this, he writes about these things, different standards for different parts of the world. That what one can expect for training a person in India would not be expected for training a person in the United States or West, and vice versa, that training a person in the West would not be the same as training a person in India. However, we have the problem in that we have an international society and people are trying to mix these standards the same way all over the world. Well, the fact of the matter is you can't, because people come from different cultures. And but we also have difficulty understanding that, well, they're doing it over there, why can't we do it over here? Well, because you're different people, that's why. It's a problem not only for female Diksha Guru, this cultural problem is a problem for the entire world. For example, right now in Europe, we have all these people coming from Islam. It's an invasion. And why it's going on is a big question, but the point is that the Vedic culture in the past, they would understand these differences between people, and they would separate them by natural geographic boundaries, like rivers and mountains or forests. Because of the modes of nature, people cannot understand each other, and therefore what is right for one person seems wrong to another one, and this simply invites conflict and controversy. So why unnecessarily disturb the mind? Better to keep everybody separate, so that these problems, so that these things do not become a problem. Anyway, back to the point of female Diksha Guru. Well, my position on this is very simple. Woman is Adi Guru. She's the most important Guru. She's the Adi Guru means the first Guru. When the child is born, for the first 5-6 years of its life, mother is the absolute truth for that child. And whatever mother does is taken by the child as the absolute truth. So she has the most important role. This is more important even than later, the role of Diksha Guru later. Her role in training the child is absolutely important. For example, the child, having no other identity, identifies completely with mother. Whatever mother does or says, that's the reality. So if mother recognizes the authority of father, if she submits herself to her husband, then the child will learn that there's an authority that's more important than me, that there's somebody over me. And the child will then learn to properly respect authority. If mother does not do that, if mother instead rejects the authority of the father, then the child takes that as a truth that I am the highest authority, and that child will later have problems with any kind of authority. So, ladies, you want to be guru? Yes. Be Adi Guru and give your child the very best training that you can by being the best mother and proper role model for your child. Yeah.
I was also thinking like men take sannyas and women come to this vanaprastha, and when a husband leaves, then a woman can help, younger generations. And when we raise children as grihastas, we see this lack of older people who will guide us and help us. And I think that
you say lack of such people.
Yeah, we would need older Matajis who stay at one place and help, younger. And I think this would be better service than having women going around as Diksha Gurus.
Yeah. So your point is that ladies, they become the matriarch after the husband is gone, taken sannyas. Then his wife would stay back and help the sons or the daughters to raise the grandchildren and so on, and be the matriarch of the family. In traditional cultures, this is always the case, and it's very much needed because everybody knows, anybody who's following this, what do they call it, the nuclear family, knows that it's so difficult, without the help of more people. It takes a lot of, you have 2 or 3 children, you have to have 8 arms, like Durga. It's impossible. So, the problem with that is that, modern society has destroyed the family traditions, and they're intent on destroying it further, because we no longer even have the nuclear family, which is what it was when I was a child. We would still come together and eat dinner together, but now we have, one of my godbrothers described it as the subatomic family. Right? Everybody's doing Bhakti-Vidya Purnamaras, doing everybody's doing their own thing quite independently. So, yes, this is why we need to establish a varnashram culture. You need to have culture, and we don't have culture. So it's a problem for everybody. It's a problem for the elderly people. They're all alone. They feel rejected. It's a problem for the children. They don't get proper training. It's a problem for every stage of life. It's a problem for the young married couple who are working and trying to maintain everything by themselves and have no time for their spiritual life. So understanding these things, it really should motivate us to cooperate together to develop the varnashram culture. Understand what that is. Which, by the way, I'm going to do a series. I'm going to give my varnashram seminar online coming up in next month. After Gaur Purnima, we're going to start. Okay, any more questions about that?
No.
Yeah.
What about women who want to be diksha gurus? I think we have some women in ISKCON that actually aspire to become diksha gurus and are supporting this movement for women diksha gurus. So they don't want this role of matriarchal mother, as you said.
What about them?
So,
What about the women who want to be diksha guru?
what would be your message?
Okay, let's understand that we want to establish a proper Vedic culture. And because that culture is superior to any other so-called culture that we have in the West. That being the case, we should submit ourselves to whatever that culture is. Now, granted, this is a challenge for the modern woman, because we're indoctrinated according to the social mores of the Western world, which tell everybody that a woman is equal to man. Well, I'm sorry to be so blunt, but the fact of the matter is, if one looks at the situation of women around the world, one can easily see that their situation is much worse off than that of the men. So how can it be that women are equal to men when they get what we would say the short end of the stick all the time? If we had a proper culture where men were in sattva gun, where the women were also in sattva gun, we wouldn't have these problems. But because the men are not in sattva gun, they're in rajagun and tamagun, they exploit the women. The women are also in rajagun and tamagun, they're trying to exploit the men. And consequently, what? Nobody's happy. Well, we shouldn't be surprised with that result, because that's the result of the lower gunas. You have to suffer. It's not some kind of mystery. It's the result of, very plainly the result of what the Bhagavad Gita teaches us. If we want to solve our problems, we have to come to sattva guna. There's no way around it. That's what I write in my spiritual economics book. You want to solve the economic problem for everybody, we all have to come to sattva guna. Otherwise, we get what we deserve. It's that simple. So I'm not sympathetic for these ladies who want to be diksha guru. Sorry, I don't think it should be allowed. They may decide to become independent and be their own, carry on as a group. That's okay. There's certainly women who do that. There's women in India who do that. What's her name? The hugging lady? Ma? Amita? Amisha? Anyway, so there's one. She's very influential. I went to see her once in the United States. She hugged people for like 20 hours in a row, and I stayed there for about 10 hours. I didn't see her once get up and go to to relieve herself. I was wondering, how is that possible? Anyway, and she has a very large following of people, and she's certainly doing some good in the world. So these people can do that. but not in the name of Vedic culture. No? Prabhupada wanted to establish in ISKCON to show society how to establish a proper culture in society, the culture of Varnashram Dharma, Daiva Varnashram Dharma, to assist people in developing their spiritual life. And we're not going to get there by doing something different. So there's a long list of questions. There's a long list of questions here about initiations and Ritvik-Vada. I'm not going to read these long questions. Basically, the Ritviks, they have their claims. Everybody might know what they are. But I'm not personally sympathetic to the idea of Ritvik. My opinion is about Ritvik that there would be no Ritvik if there was not the problems with our leadership that there were in the early and mid-80s. But because the leaders, practically speaking, destroyed the movement that they helped Prabhupada to create, therefore devotees were looking for an alternative, but at the same time still be loyal to Srila Prabhupada. And the Ritvik concept gave them a way to do that. As far as I understand it, and I've not made an in-depth study of Ritvik, but as far as I understand it, their whole thesis rests on one word, which is henceforward. And that letter was written by Tamal Krishna, not by Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada may very well have used a different word had he written that letter. In any case, it says henceforward, and therefore they take that to mean for all time and place. My opinion is very strongly that had Prabhupada intended to deviate from the Vaishnava Siddhanta in such a significant way that he would have said much more about it in his books, and especially in his instructions to his leaders in his conversations, morning walk and room conversations. But Prabhupada did not. They take one letter to be the claim that Prabhupada intended. From now on, Prabhupada will be the guru of all these people. I don't accept that. It's not in keeping with the Vaishnava Siddhanta. And Prabhupada, if you study his works, you will see that Prabhupada was very much in keeping with Vaishnava Siddhanta. He did not deviate from the Vaishnava Siddhanta. So we can't accept that the idea of Ritvik-Vada being the desire of Srila Prabhupada. Now, there's another question here, somewhat related to this, about initiation. Guru means teacher. The word spiritual master does not give the full proper idea. Teacher means that he is leading us through every step of raganuga-sadhana. That is the only way of secret flow of Mahaprabhu's line comes down to us. Now, when considering the fact that the average ISKCON guru has hundreds of disciples around the world, yet he usually is so busy with traveling and preaching that he often does not even have time to answer his emails or the letters from his disciples, what to speak of giving spiritual guidance. And as for Shiksha gurus, in this regard, one may or may not have the luck of finding an appropriate person who inspires him for such guidance, not to mention someone who is at the same time also willing to guide the devotee step by step, all the way through Raganuga Bhakti. So it seems like impossible to advance Raganuga in ISKCON. I don't agree with this thesis at all. Regarding the relationship between the guru and disciple, it's a personal relationship. And one should understand what they need from that relationship when they enter into it. The problem I see is that many devotees take guru as a fashion, what Prabhupada advised us not to do. That one of my godbrothers, one time he asked one of his newly initiated disciples, right after the initiation, "Why did you want me for your guru?" And the answer was, "Because you give good names." No. That's a question you should have asked him before the initiation. If it were me and I got such an answer, he wouldn't have got initiated, right? But this is the situation that we have, because we don't really understand what it is that we're trying to do. In many cases, ISKCON is somewhat of a social club. It's, of course, it helps us in many ways to make progress in spiritual life. But there's, from questions like this, there's some lack of understanding of actually what's going on. So first thing is, the onus is on the disciple to understand what does he need in the relationship with the guru. Now, in every relationship there must be some reciprocation, otherwise there's no relationship. Prabhupada didn't meet with every one of his disciples, and in fact, I joined in 73, and we felt it inappropriate for us to write to Prabhupada. Of course, in those days there was no email. We didn't feel that we wanted to impose on Prabhupada with writing him, and so most of us did not. Prabhupada did correspond with his leaders in questions that were of importance for the society, and Prabhupada expected that those instructions that he gave in those letters would be disseminated throughout the organization. Reciprocation. So there has to be some reciprocation. Now, Prabhupada, of course, reciprocated with his disciples through his books, through his lectures, and of course, in those days we had tapes of his lectures and morning walks and so on. So that's one way. And I would think that today's gurus, or my godbrothers, that they also, of course, this is communication age, there must be, every one of them have a website and they must have their lectures there, so it's the same kind of thing. We cannot expect at this point in time that with so many disciples, so many aspiring disciples and so few who are initiating, that there's going to be time for close association or communication. It's really not realistic. However, in another 1 or 2 generations, that situation would change. For example, Prabhupada was constantly traveling, even at an advanced age. And I can tell you, I'm not, even at the age that where Prabhupada began, and traveling it's getting troublesome. So he took on a great burden to guide his society. So in this age of modern communications being what they are, there must be websites and so on like that. And this will change in another 1 or 2 generations. If the devotees actually take their spiritual life seriously and qualify themselves to become diksha guru. Or let's say a bona fide guru, as Prabhupada so many times uses that expression. So in time, the society will develop, or let's say the opportunity for having a personal guidance of the diksha guru will develop. Okay, next one is Krishna West. Very interesting topic for everyone. Actually, I have some sympathy for Krishna West, because when I was just first reading Prabhupada's books, I read Bhagavad Gita, Krishna book, and teachings of Lord Chaitanya before I ever met any devotees. They would come through town, I would see them now and again, but I have to admit that I was intimidated by their appearance. And so because of that, I do have some appreciation for the ideas of Krishna West. And I think the approach of Devamrita Swami is probably one of the best ones. As I understand, in New Zealand, they have what they call the Bhakti House, where the devotees dressed in like regular people. And people come in and they can have an introduction to what Krishna consciousness without that intimidation. I've also often in the past thought that we try to give everyone too much too soon. That there should be some restriction that we should not immediately just dump everything and onto people, because it is too much. It's quite overwhelming. People with foreheads and forearms and different color skin, and it really is a little extreme sometimes. But I don't find a problem with that. However, what I do have a problem with is that this should be the standard forever. My opinion is that how can you have a change of heart if you can't have a change of clothes? And for me personally, changing my dress and being willing to go out in public with tilak on, wearing a dhoti, this is very important for my making progress in Krishna consciousness, because it was a public statement that I'm with them. I'd rather be with these weird people than with you who are stuck in mundane material consciousness. It was a big, important step for me. And I think that Krishna West should modify their approach to gradually introducing some change like that. And I think if they did, there'd be much less problems for them in the society than there are now. I have appreciation for Hridayananda Maharaj. When I was just a new bhakta, he'd come and stayed at the temple where I was at, and I had the opportunity to ask him all of my questions, and so I'm indebted to him for helping me understand Krishna consciousness. But at the same time, I have to call him on this, that he's taking it a little bit too far. And I wish he would adjust things to help the devotees after some stage, maybe a year, 6 months, a year, whatever, to introduce the next step of making some sacrifice for Krishna, making a statement of who are you going to be with? Are you going to be with the devotees, or are you going to be with the karmis?
Okay. Why do we need separate thing?
Make a philosophy out of it.
Does this have to be
branded
branch?
That's
like
why do they make a brand out of it? That's what everybody does these days, right? I don't know. Well, I haven't studied his whole philosophy thoroughly, and I don't want to say something for fear of perhaps misquoting him. But my understanding is that he says that what we're presenting is the Indianized version of the philosophy. We don't need the Indian cultures, we simply take the philosophy. I have a problem with that also. The culture, and this is coming from Bhaktivedanta Purna Maharaj also in his lectures on Dhanesvara Dharma, the culture actually stems from this culture of Goloka Vrindavan, where there's certain things that enhance the relationship or the loving exchange between the devotees, and that's called rasa, and those things that interfere with that loving exchange are called rasa vas. And that culture, that whole thing comes down to us in the material world as a perverted reflection, where we're trying to be the Purusha, whether we're male or female. And so what it means is we don't have the culture. So there is an importance to the culture. There is an importance of seeing ourselves as das anadas, right? The servant of the servant, because we want to develop that consciousness in relationship to Krishna. So that culture is very, very important for us to make proper progress in spiritual life. How do we make progress without understanding ourselves as das anadas? I don't think it's possible. Did I answer your question?
I asked, why does this have to be a separate branch? Can this not be just like bridge preaching inside of ISKCON? Or something like that?
Well, I think it's become. Why does it have to be separate? I think it's become separate because he's gone to such extremes. He's deviated so widely from the norm of ISKCON. For example, before in New Vrindavan we had Kirtananda Swami, who was also making an extreme deviation, and we know what the result of that was. So here we have another extreme deviation, an extreme cultural deviation. So I think actually better to brand it so that people don't confuse. Oh, this is ISKCON? I thought ISKCON was like that. Actually, I think it's better. Okay, next topic. The devotees must understand what Krishna consciousness is. One of the doubts devotees seem to have quite often is the effectiveness of the process. They say that there are so many devotees practicing Krishna consciousness who don't seem to make much progress. Some are practicing and following strictly for many years, but it seems that instead of becoming soft-hearted, they become more like robots, just doing everything externally, but without any apparent devotion. Some devotees are also becoming bitter and angry and more critical of others and lacking compassion. If we were to judge by the result, it seems that the process has failed many such ISKCON devotees. Why is this so? And my answer to this is that, yes, it's true, because we don't understand what it is that we're trying to do. It's very simple. We mistake the temple and its activities for Krishna consciousness, what Krishna consciousness is. And it works like this. When we come to Krishna consciousness, we come as materially conditioned souls. And as materially conditioned souls, we are naturally focused on externals, because that's what material means. Who am I in terms of how do I dress, where do I live, etc., etc. And at some point, we're meant to actually have a change of heart where we understand how to be inner directed by coming in contact with the Lord as the super soul. If we continue to be externally directed, we're going to make ourselves vulnerable to being misdirected. Because we do what we think we're supposed to do. I'm the kind of devotee that I think I'm supposed to do. And we lose touch with our own heart. And also we don't understand the process clearly. Why are we not making progress? Well, Rupa Goswami in Upadeshamrita, he gives 6 and 6 notes for making progress in devotional service. And if we look at that list, we can see that the devotees are not following. And if we don't follow his instructions, how can we expect to make progress? For example, common to both of those lists is not to associate with non-devotees. Now, how do you have a job, work out in the world with materialistic people, mostly spend the majority of your day with them, and not expect to be influenced by that? In my experience, it's not possible. And so I would try to find jobs where I had no contact with such people, such as driving a truck and being a night watchman and things like that. Not every devotee will do that, though. Some of them, they choose career instead. One of my godbrothers, who is a lawyer, he said that if my colleagues knew that I was a Hare Krishna, it'd be the kiss of death for my career. So he has to hide his devotion and try to be one of them. Well, if we're doing that, then how is it going to be possible for us to be like one of the devotees? So this point of association is extremely important. What to speak of compromising ourselves in so many other ways, such as eating food cooked by non-devotees. One develops a hellish mentality, Prabhupada writes. So we take these things too cheaply without understanding what it is that we're trying to do. So it's important that we understand what is the process and what am I trying to achieve and what's the the process by which I go about achieving that. Our introduction to Krishna consciousness is unique and different for everybody, and we all come from different reasons, so we have to find our motivation in different ways. And as we know, ISKCON is a very large society, and it's unique in every place, depends on the local leadership and what they're like. So the local leadership, if they're responsible, if they have a broad vision and are inclusive, then we may get good training. If they're not, then we may not. So we can say perhaps that it's not consistent. In my travel, I see that many times the devotees are not getting proper instruction, especially because when I travel, not being a guru, I don't have I don't get all the perks that the gurus get. So instead of staying in the real high-class places, I stay more with the ordinary devotees, and I get to see how they live, how clean they are. And how they live is a reflection of what their understanding is, or at least a reflection of, are they more in sattva, rajas, or tamas? And we see a little bit too much tamagun, to be honest. So this is reflective. It's a symptom that if we're actually making progress, we would expect to see more sattva. But again, how are we going to do that? We live in a society that's in rajagun and tamagun. How are we going to stay in that society and come to sattvagun? Again, it's next to impossible. So this is why for many years I was advocating establishing a Varnashram culture in ISKCON. And after 5 or 6 years of doing that, I actually came to the conclusion that Varnashram Dharma cannot be established in ISKCON. Because so many reasons, but basically the leadership doesn't understand it and they don't advocate it, and therefore the disciples and followers are not going to do it. Consequently, they're going to have to deal with living in the modern world. Unfortunately, most of my Guru God brothers have not worked in their lives. They're career ISKCON devotees. Many of them, or most of them, Brahmacaris and sannyasis. I, on the other hand, was a grahasta. I have 3 children. And I had to work, and I knew what the effect was on my consciousness of having to go to work. It was devastating. And therefore, I can understand the need for establishing an economic alternative that would allow the devotees to have their support, to maintain their themselves and their families without becoming so compromised. But I don't see it. I don't see it developing. So it's going to continue to be a problem. Anyway, that's why I think, the process is failing. Yeah, ISKCON is failing. The society in general is failing, and the individual devotees do not understand what it is they're trying to do. There's a similar question to this, that one group is claiming that ISKCON devotees don't have a clear understanding of the supreme destination of the Gaudiya Vaisnavas. And this gets into raganuga-bhakti and so on. And I can also say that that's a fact, that we're not being trained properly, and that some devotees, even senior devotees, are afraid of this word raganuga-bhakti. Don't go there, that's only for somebody that's very advanced. But we have to understand the process. There's 2 very nice books written for those who are English speaking. One is Follow Rupa Raghunath by one devotee of the name Prabhupada Das. That's available on Amazon. And the other one is Realization Understanding and Realization of Your Eternal Identity by my godbrother Uttama Shloka. The first one is a rather short book. It can be read in about 3 hours. The other book is much more in depth. It would probably take 15 to 20 hours to read. But both give a very good overview from beginning to end of the whole process of both sadhana, Vaidhi sadhana bhakti and raganuga-sadhana bhakti. So the devotees would do well to educate themselves in understanding what I call the map, what I call the map of devotional service. You want to go someplace, you have a map. You have to know what your destination is. Comment?
When I saw these questions, I was thinking like we devotees sometimes want to speak on these topics and we don't even have definitions in front of us. We don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah, so read those books. Follow Rupa Raghunath. It's a short book. I think you get it on Amazon for a very low price. And it covers the whole thing, A to Z. And then the other one is more in depth and also very highly recommended. Okay, one last question about fracking in New Vrindavan. Just a short one, and I can answer this because I discussed this with some of the devotees who live in New Vrindavan. Hydraulic fracking is taking place in the area of New Vrindavan. Regardless of the many environmental and health risks associated with the process, many people blame ISKCON for this, saying that the GBC signed gas leases. Doesn't ISKCON, as a religious institution that is following and preaching the highest dharma, have responsibility to show by example, our correct relationship with the environment and the general public well-being? Well, first thing is, this is an example of borrowing trouble. Somebody in the ISKCON is doing something, you don't know anything about it, and you're saying that there's a problem. Actually, this is fault finding. If you knew something about it, you would understand that the devotees had no choice, that this was coming to their area. All their neighbors were going to do it because of the financial benefits, and it was going to go on, and that if they did not participate, they had no way to influence what the outcome would be. With their participation, because it's a large community and who owns a lot of land, they were able to actually have a significant impact on how the decisions were made. What company that was going to be selected? They selected a company that was going to use well casings to protect the environment. And so they actually created the best situation out of something that was going to happen one way or the other. It didn't matter whether they went along with it or not, it was going to happen. And if they didn't, if they weren't involved, it was potentially going to be very destructive for the environment there. But with their being involved, it was much less the case. So, again, this is an example. Far away, what does it have to do with us? Better that we don't get involved in such things. Give the devotees the benefit of the doubt sometimes. Most devotees, at least in my experience, devotees are the best people on this planet. And I'd rather be with any of them, regardless even of how fallen they might be, because at least with them you can talk about Krishna. Whereas if you're with any kind of materialist, however well polished they might be, they're not interested in Krishna. So devotees are wonderful people, and we should always be careful not to offend them. So there's many, many more questions that we didn't cover, some of which I probably don't want to cover. But we may make another episode about this, or make another video. Any other comments? So, thank you very much. Please chant Hare Krishna and be happy. Thanks.
Thank you.
So, back to your question.
Yes.
I gave, you can turn it off. I gave I did a seminar in the Russian festival, 2011, about family life. And I dealt with that. One of my classes, which everybody seemed to avoid, was about how to conquer over sex desire. The other class that I got criticized for was where I was stating that you have to act from where you're at. You can't be something that you're not. If you're not a yogi, you're not, you're addicted to porn, you're not going to be able to be celibate. It just ain't going to happen, So what you have to work from there. You have to take the next step. It's so strange. The camera goes off and I can speak so naturally, right? I mean, there's something weird about cameras.
Yeah.
Anyway, you have to take the next step that you can take, And that means, minimize your sexual activity, but, to go to once a month only for procreation, not in this culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, that couldn't happen. And what happens is devotees get all we're like Catholics, we become guilty. Oh, I'm such a sinner, I should be doing that, Well, the first thing is, and I forgot to mention this on the video, that one should not take a vow that they can't keep. So in my class with the Russians, I told them, don't take a vow that you can't keep. And so the question came up with, well, what if your guru says that, you can only have sex once a month, time for procreation? I said, well, you better find another guru, right?
Yeah.
Why take what's the meaning of your taking initiation? He's giving you an instruction you can't follow. What's the point? Well, I want to be initiated. So, we don't understand what we're doing. It's we're trying to be something that we're not. We have this, somehow or other, we have this idea that in my class, actually, I was quoting letters from Prabhupada, and I was quoting Prabhupada. My understanding, Prabhupada was actually instructing that illicit sex means sex outside of marriage,
Yes.
or sex that's not for procreation. So my position was you have sex with your wife and don't use any contraception. Now, is it 10 times a month? Okay, then you try to do less, and less and less and less, When the time you get to be in your 50s, maybe you can do it only once a month. Okay, it might take that long,
It's a gradual process.
Yeah.
From where you are to...
You have to become purified. You have to become... Why? Because when we indulge in illicit sex, it makes an impression on the consciousness, sanskara, right?
Yes.
And so that sinful activity forces us to do more sinful activity.
Yes.
So you have to be... How do you become free from that? You have to separate yourself from that stuff. So stop watching pornography.
Yes.
That's a must.
Yes.
Okay, that's a big step if you can do that. Next thing is, how does Prabhupada, Bhakti Vinod, the way he puts it is, without sense gratification, one would die. And Prabhupada sometimes he refers to sexual intercourse as sense gratification. Anyway, devotees somehow or other have gotten this idea that, we're all going to be celibate, and it's just not a reality.
Yeah. We study Bhakti Purna's lectures a lot, and it boosts the proper intelligence.
It what?
Boosts the proper intelligence when you listen to him.
Yeah.
And wow, it's just perfect what devotees should listen, because otherwise you get like this bipolar mentality, and it's crazy. It just doesn't work.
Also, we were listening to one Christian pastor about sex
Yes.
life,
Uh-huh.
and he puts nice culture into sex life.
Yes.
It becomes
More
much.
sattvic.
Yeah.
Everything becomes more sattvic.
Yes.
And
Yeah, that's it. I mean, that's the idea. You have to come
Yeah.
from Tamagun to
Yes.
Rajagun to
Yes.
Sattvagun. You
Yes.
can't go from Tamagun to Sudasattva.
No.
It couldn't happen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Exactly.
And also this.
Yeah. One of the examples I gave was in the early days. I think it was not Brahmananda, his brother, Gargamuni. Maybe it was Brahmananda. But one of them, they were disturbed by sex desire. They told Prabhupada that, and so Prabhupada told me he should get married. And so my point is that, okay, why does he tell him to get married? Not to have sex with his wife?
Yes.
Is that going to help somehow? I don't know. What's the idea there?
Yeah.
Your mind's disturbed by sex desire, so now you're going to live with a woman and not have sex. That's going to be worse.
Yes. Yes.
Crazy.
Better to go in forest or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not logic.
But the point is, we have the minimal standard, which is inside the marriage, and the topmost standard, which is celibacy, which is the same as only for procreation.
Once we heard that, but we don't have any quote that Grihastha ashram is meant for having children, because our experience is that when you get children from sex, then the whole many realizations come from
Yeah.
A lot.
Sure.
what this means,
Yeah.
having
Yeah.
sex.
Yeah. And
it's
children
a whole
regulate
process.
your sex life also. That goes
That's
together.
fact.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it goes together.
It's, it's nature's way,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, everybody, practically very few exceptions, has to go through that experience.
Yes.
Should go through that experience.
Most. Yeah.
Yeah, both men and women.
Yeah.
And, of course, unfortunately today people don't get married. They don't have any faith in it. They don't understand what is marriage. They think, oh, it's just a piece of paper, so, but it's
Yes.
not that, it's actually, it's the idea is like making a commitment. And again, Bhakti Vidyapurna, he speaks about that very clearly, that when you restrict yourself, then your relationship becomes deeper.
Deeper. Yes.
You heard that lecture?
Yes.
Yeah, he's so sharp. If you don't restrict yourself, how do you have a close relationship?
You don't.
It's
shallow.
impossible.
It's very shallow.
So you have to restrict yourself, and that act means that you're going to have a more satisfying relationship, more satisfying marriage.
Yes. Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So we are trying to preach this, help devotees. To
Yeah. Do
understand
you get
this.
any bad reaction from it?
No, no,
Nobody's
They-
saying, "Oh, you're teaching Maya."
not yet.
Not
Well, this is what happened for me
Everybody
from
was-
the Russian festival. The
Oh,
devotees,
yeah. I can
the
imagine.
devotees, they love it.
Yeah.
And they're very grateful, but one devotee in Russia went and complained to the National Council,
Yeah.
and so they took me to task and said, that I was, wrong. And I wrote him back a letter that was published translated. It was published in Russian. It's become a very famous letter. You know about that?
No.
Yeah. Again, I was challenging them that this idea of first of all, nobody can restrict their senses. So and plus when you try to do that, if you try artificial renunciation, it creates problems. You get psychotic.
Yes.
I knew at least 3 men who were nice devotees, really good devotees, but because they didn't have normal relationship with their wife, they wound up becoming child molesters.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
because you can't repress it; it's going to pop out in some crazy way.
There was also one more question regarding this, about, what did you say? Tantrični, da nimajo problem s prostato.
Oh yeah, I heard one study about, men, they get prostate
Celibate
cancer,
men.
and celibate men, but not the proper celibate men, but those tantric celibate men, they don't get, never. They don't have problems with prostate.
Uh-huh.
But a lot of ISKCON gurus, they have, there's something more to it, to this celibacy. You have to transform this energy, otherwise these lower chakras will not work properly and you get problems. So there is some knowledge we don't have, how this human body works.
There's a book written by Wilhelm Reich. He was a student of Freud.
Oh yeah, he's very...
You know this book?
I know William.
Called The
Reich.
Function of the Orgasm.
Okay.
I got that book. It was very hard to get. I could only buy it in the United States. And I don't know where it is now. I think it's somewhere in Russia. But he studied this whole sex psychology thing in a very, very deep way. Okay. And he actually, I wasn't able to read the whole book. I got as far, but he was making a case that for people to live simple lives, they have to have a natural sex life.
Yeah.
If they're restricting their sex life in some way, that it's going to influence the rest of their life, so that they live in an artificial way, right? Rather than a natural way on the land. Okay. And I was very amazed to read that. I was like, whoa, you know.
Yeah, he was quite good with many things.
You know him?
Yeah,
Right?
I know. Yeah, he was into this organ energy stuff.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I think they killed him because of this.
Yeah, they did. They put him in prison the day before he was supposed to get out. He had a heart attack.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's amazing. He was onto something because in 1948 in the United States they burned all his books.
Yeah.
Now that means you're really pressing somebody's buttons because they don't burn your books for nothing.
Yes.
You know, so he was really onto the truth.
Yes.
And they didn't want it to come out.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Anyway, try to get a hold of that. Might find some.
Okay, I will try to get some of this.
There's a website for Reich.
Okay.
And that's where I ordered the book from. It was expensive. It was $40. And otherwise, they're not in print. It's an old book. They don't have a modern printing. I was going to scan it and actually put it out on the internet, but anyway, wasn't able to find time.
But you have this book still?
I only had that one book. But it was, he wrote several also on the same subject. Freud, for example, they actually understood what was going on. There was a lot of child molestation going on in Germany. And Freud, when he first started his work, people were coming to him, they were complaining about, their parents were molesting him. So he started to speak about that, and his career was going down the tubes. Yeah. So then he changed his whole idea of this Oedipus complex, and and when he came along with that that really didn't happen. You're just it's penis envy or envy of your father. Then then his career took off. So the demons are controlling it. So also so his students Wilhelm Reich, and who was the other one? Erich Fromm.
I don't know.
He's a wonderful writer, Erich Fromm, wonderful books. And he wrote also something about that, but don't remember what the name of it is. Anyway, good luck with that. You're in contact with the with the Gras Division team?
Also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know some of those.
What's her name? Sridevi? You know? She's
I know two of the couples, Partha and his wife.
Yeah, she comes to Slovenia. She's from this team, and we talk and we discuss.
Oh,
yeah, she loves this.
What we Partha do. And what's his wife's name?
I don't know.
Partha, Canadian. They're Canadian from Vancouver.
Oh, this Sri Devi, she's Indian.
No, that's a different one. Then there's another couple that's from Alachua. They've all, all the couples on that cross division team, they're married more than 30 years.
Okay, nice.
Yeah. So they do a nice service traveling around.
Yeah, so we started with seminars, teaching the youngsters how to search for a proper partner and what's the whole deal about. And
Yeah, it's so needed. It's so needed.
Yeah.
Matchmaking,
Yes. Yeah.
it's such a great service if you do that.
We already put 2 couples together, and it happened like, spontaneously. We knew both, but they didn't know each other. And we just put them together. We saw they are a perfect match, on the mind level and everything. And they are still together and happy and everything.
Uh-huh.
So then we got these realizations that maybe we could help in some way. And we started
Get some
So-
astrologer involved so you can
we need
get some help.
we are searching for a good astrologer. We also made a questionnaire, like a list of questions for all the interested parties. So they put, what they expect and how they are and everything. You get some idea from this. And
Yeah,
so,
the problem is many times people don't think about it,
Yes.
because everything is so dominated by sex attraction
Yeah.
that they don't think, what do I need in a spouse? I
Yeah.
mean, it's just like a normal young person without experience in life. They don't even know the questions to ask, right?
Sometimes, yes.
So they need help with that,
Yeah.
to think about, what's your lifestyle? Are you
Yeah.
clean? Are you messy?
Yes.
To what degree are you clean?
Yes.
Because it's always the one who's more clean who's going to have the problem.
Yeah. With the other one. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's like, okay, you're a little bit messy. Okay, that's good. But if you're spotless,
And the other one is
And the
completely
other
the
one's-
opposite.
well, he
It's-
doesn't even have to be the opposite. He just has to be not spotless.
and it's
And
a
both of them
problem.
are going to have a problem.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, it's a lot of things.
yeah.
What is your position about, there's one problem. I was speaking with some devotees considering finding a partner, that they feel that if you do it the proper Vedic way, that sometimes, as in contrast how people do it outside, is that you don't really get to know the person from all angles of vision, so to speak.
What do you mean? If you don't jump into bed with them?
Well, not just jump in the bed, but you don't get to live with them for some period of time to see them actually how they're thinking, living.
Well, I mean, that's the problem with the dominant culture. Ideally, the parents really, there's a lot to be said for the parents deciding, because parents, they have maturity, they know what the families are both like, they know what the children are like, and they can see, are these children going to be compatible? That the idea is that, and this is said right in the Bhagavatam, that the man and woman, they should be as identical as possible in all different aspects of life, in their education, their social status, their economic status, and so on like that. And, again, young people, if they're looking by themselves, they don't even know how to ask about that. There's just too many assumptions, or, love will conquer everything, But you get a little experience, that's not true. That's just called Rajagun.
Yeah.
Love is not love, it's Rajagun.
There are also examples of other devotees doing the matchmaking, or even gurus giving advice about who to hook up with who, and in the end the match was a disaster. It was not good.
Well, the chart isn't everything. It's something. It's one part of the equation. As I said, the parents they would look at the chart, but they would also look at each other. And because they're adults with years of experience, they could, at least in India, they would have several generations of experience, and they have all their whole Gotra thing and all that. In the West, we don't have so much culture, but even still, the parents are in a much better position to be able to see, is there going to be compatibility or not. The boy and girl, they get together and it's Rajagun, and so, they can't see anything else.
Bhaktivedanta Swami just had this question on his lecture. And he said that But the problem is not the matchmaking, but that we don't know how to be married, you know.
No, that's true.
Many
That's true.
times.
Yeah, we're not trained, or
Yeah.
we don't have good example from our own parents,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because maybe both mom and dad are working, we don't even know what a parent is, you know?
Yes.
They come home, or they're always going out to eat or something like that. Well, you know, what's a family?
Yeah. Or they are broken, only mother or only father.
Yeah. So, yeah, Kali Yuga, it's terrible.
Yeah, it's terrible.
So, again, why we need culture, why we need Varnashram culture. But I don't have much faith for it coming about in ISKCON. You can't even, in the ISKCON leadership seminar, you can't even use the word Varnashram.
Yeah. I mean, I heard Shiva Ramaswamy, he's trying something.
Yeah, finally,
direction.
they're talking about it. Well, he's got enough status that they're not going to try to, you know,
And he has
quiet him down.
nice.
But, you know, some years ago, maybe 4 years ago, I was at one of the ILS meetings, and we went to the stage. We were supposed to talk about, how do they call it? ISKCON rural communities. Anyway, we didn't pay attention to that. We just spoke about Varnashram Dharma, and the leader said that they had a fit. I used the word Varnashram. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a problem.
Prabhupada used it.
Yeah.
We had this seminar about Vedic
Levels of consciousness.
levels of consciousness, and we recorded it. And when we were listening at home to this seminar, my God, I had like this vision in front of me. What this means, if we would just put people into levels of consciousness, devotees also.
Yeah.
I mean, it's powerful knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Who is speaking about that?
Because
It's based on Bhakti
Bhakti
Purna's
Purna's
seminars.
Uh-huh.
levels of consciousness.
You know, the Sanama, Pranama, and so on.
Yeah.
5 levels.
Because then there is no, nobody can cheat you that he's a great devotee or something.
Yeah.
You just see him. You are here, you are here, you are here.
Yeah.
You see everyone. So
Yeah.
it's dangerous.
Reality.
Yeah.
Live in reality. What a concept. Should we go to Kirtan?
Can I ask
Yes.
first, why is this Varnashrama so dangerous? I mean, why nobody wants to talk?
I don't know. Well, again, it could be the cultural thing. We didn't get a straight answer to that. Because people are going to confuse it with the caste system.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Well, so we educate them. That's what we do. We do. People, they think we're Hindus. Well, we educate them about that. Okay, you're talking about Varnashram. No, it's not the caste system, but there's different people, and, I don't know. I didn't agree with it. I didn't like it. So I didn't participate. It's just,
Yeah, well,
It's
okay.
sad, actually.
And nobody wants to be
yeah,
sure.
Yeah, nobody wants to be Shudra anyway. Yeah. It's like,
And unfortunately, that's the leadership,
yeah.
They don't have a clear concept. So it'll take some time. Or actually, my conclusion is it'll develop outside of ISKCON.
No, maybe Hungary will develop it.
Well,
on their own.
actually, it's going to develop in different parts of the world in different ways.
Yeah, different ways.
And it depends on the leadership and the people who are giving guidance.
Yes.
So Hungary, they're trying to understand it, and they're going to have their way of teaching it.
Yes.
Bhakti Raghava Swami, he's going to have his way of teaching it.
Mm.
I have my own understanding also, which is a little bit different from all of them. For me, the economics of it is extremely important, because what we try to do, we try to bring money economy into Varnashram's culture. It doesn't work. It destroys it.
Yes.
Money destroys Varnashram culture. And we have to be very clear about that. But then how do you live in this world without money?
Yeah. on the fast.
So,
It's the only way.
But it's,
well, even still,
In
you
one
know,
sense.
you can't just live without money. You know, so there
Yeah.
has to be a plan for gradually divesting oneself of that concept. It's it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time.
Let's see.
Srila Prabhupada ki.
Jai. Thank you very much.
Right.
Hare